What's up, everybody? I am your host, a bloodthirsty rat, and that is my co-host, a husband who will do anything to keep his land and his boy. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we tackle an amazing slow burn that's way too good for Netflix. Stephen King's 1922. This is a movie that you have wanted to cover since the beginning of the show.
Yeah, there's been a many weeks I've talked about doing this.
Yep.
I know it was this and The Ritual for a long time.
I was going to say, I've heard you bring up The Ritual in 1922 more times than I can remember.
Yeah, well, yeah, and this was a big reason for getting Netflix back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is just such a awesome, dark, the imagery in this movie, the metaphors for it that's in it, symmetry. It's an awesome dark. Really feels like one of those great independent slow burns. The cinematography is fucking beautiful.
In my opinion, it's one of the best adaptations of a Stephen King story. I think it was done really well. I was very impressed by Thomas Jane.
Good God.
He kills it.
Is fucking on another level in this movie.
Yeah, and the director and writer, Zak Hilditch, because he did a fantastic job writing this movie, especially like the dialogue for something that takes place in like 1920s America, where slang and pronunciation were drastically different than it is now. It reminds me of Robert Eggers and The Witch, how they went back and pulled all this stuff from back then that you don't really think about now. And this movie does a real good job of like sayings and slangs for certain things and how things were pronounced. And I really like that. I think it makes it very authentic.
Yeah, it's a timepiece, and there's a lot of timepieces that go back and do a good job. And then there's those movies that go to another level, like this, and you've mentioned The Witch. Yeah, man, this movie, it's a slow burn, but it locks you in, at least for me. It locked me in, and it feels like you're, like, you know what it's like to be on a farm in 1922.
Yeah, it does a good job.
Yeah, and one thing with cinematography in this movie, because it's such a dark but beautiful movie, they do such a good job at using the lighting available in 1922. Like, there's not these additional lightings, they don't have, regular lights in their house. It's a lot of, like, lantern lit lighting and
kind of natural.
Kind of like The Witch.
Yeah, how natural lighting.
The natural lighting, yeah, how they really capitalized on that. Man, it just overall, too, if I had to sum this movie up with one word, I would say creepy. Like, there's a handful of moments. This movie has only a few, like, really scary moments, but those moments are legit fucking scary.
It has good timing with its scary moments. But there is a lot of dread and build up to this movie. And you get through about an hour of it, and then you really just kind of see that this snowball that's slowly gotten bigger and bigger really snowballs probably like the last like 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah, and you know how I am about those dreadful, awful endings.
Yes, it has a very bleak ending.
This whole movie is just it shows essentially it's poetic justice the entire time. It shows what one decision, really bad decision, how it could snowball in ways that you never would imagine. But you hit that point where it's kind of a roller coaster ride downhill, though, the whole time. There is no ups at a certain point in this movie. And they really do a good job where you're like, holy shit, can it get much worse? And that it does. It does. Do not murder your wife.
No. If you haven't seen this movie, go check it out. It is definitely worth a watch. I know this isn't like a huge movie. And one of the things we like to do on the show is talk about movies that we think are really good that maybe you'll go out and watch it and you'll find a new movie that you really like that you didn't really know much about. So that's what we're going to do here.
Yeah, I would, I think this movie deserves to be so much bigger. I hate that it has the confines of Netflix.
Yeah, agree.
Because, you can't even buy a physical version of this unless you get it from somebody who makes it, which is on my list of things to do. But Netflix has never released a physical media version of this movie. I know because we wanted to cover it and I've tried to buy it. I hate that it has those confines of Netflix because this was 2017. I think this was one of the best. I mean, I would put it in probably the top 5 movies that came out in 2017. I mean, it's one of the top movies, and it doesn't get that recognition. So hopefully, we can shed some light on that and give it some of the recognition it deserves.
Yeah, so before we jump into this, we just want to say rest in peace to our man Tony Todd, famous for Candyman and more recently the Final Destination series. You will forever be missed, and your legacy lives on in your movies, and I don't think you will ever be forgotten in the horror community. So thank you for what you gave us, and condolences to the Todd family. My favorite story is him where he put the real bees in his fucking mouth for that scene. Like that's an OG move.
That's next level. That's McFoley on the tack.
Yeah.
Coming out of the cave. I mean, that's dedication.
Yeah, so, and I always loved seeing, like, he would be, like, on the Eli Roth History of Horrors or, like, top, 100 horror movies to watch. And he always did those kind of things, and he always had really good interviews, and he was, I know he was really about meeting the horror fans, so unfortunately, he passed away. So, bummer.
Yeah, I know he's like super known for Candyman, but when I think of him, I think of Final Destination.
Yeah.
I love the Final Destination series, minus one of the movies. That doesn't deserve to be called a Final Destination. That's some movies we need to get into at some point. I imagine something's going to come up in season 2. We're going to go down that road at some point.
Yeah, I was really crossing my fingers that he was going to be in the new one. I don't know actually if they started filming it or not, so I kind of lost track of it because it, they did that thing where they're about to start it, and I eventually just kind of lost track of it.
They did that thing that they do.
That thing that they did.
That seems like,
they do that a lot.
90% of movies that you hear about. I would imagine that he's not going to be in it because I don't think they've started shooting it because I have not heard anything on it in a while, so.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's jump into 1922.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at GrindhouseSyndicate.Horror.Pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to go insane and be tormented by flesh-eating rats, give us a review. So 1922 is a 2017 American horror drama film written and directed by Zak Hilditch, based on Stephen King's 2010 novella of the same name. It's starring Thomas Jane, Neil Donahue, and Molly Parker. The film was released on Netflix on October 20th of 2017. It was produced by Campfire Productions and Mist Entertainment. It premiered at Fantastic Fest September 23rd of 2017 and had a budget of $5 million. In 2013, director Zak Hilditch came across Full Dark No Stars from 2010, a collection of 4 novellas by Stephen King. Hilditch decided to adapt 1922 into a motion picture as he had found the story to have been cinematic. He then wrote the screenplay before even finding out if he would be able to obtain the rights to the project. He then met producer Ross M. Dennerstein in Los Angeles, who sent his screenplay to Netflix. Hilditch was quickly told that his idea would become a film under the platform. Filming took place in Vancouver, Canada, and due to harvesting season, a farmhouse with a cornfield could not be found in time before filming, resulting in the corn depicted in the film being made using corn props from China, CGI, and shots taken from a similar farm located in Australia.
Holy fucking shit.
Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting that.
No, that is a lot of corn to prop and CGI.
Well, I've assumed they probably did 10 rows and CGI'd the rest of it.
Yeah, but still, even 10 rows. I mean, it looks good. It looks like some solid corn.
Well, all the, far back of the whole field and stuff, that's taken from a farm in Australia, so.
Yeah, and that stuff's easy to CGI in nowadays, but just the up-close stuff, especially when they're, like, plowing through, and like, 2 scenes you see that. Yeah, man, it looks like corn that I would eat.
Yeah. So 1922 received positive reviews from website Rotten Tomatoes, reporting an approval rating of 91% based on 44 reviews, with an average rating of 6.9 out of 10. The site's critics' consensus reads, thanks to director Zak Hilditch, patient storytelling, and strong work from lead Thomas Jane, 1922 ranks among the more satisfying Stephen King adaptations. Metacritic reports a score of 70 out of 100 based on 8 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews.
Man, this is one of those movies that, like, Rotten Tomatoes is going to rate it good.
Yeah,
like, just watching
got that vibe.
It's got that vibe. And what, like the critics explained there, the patient storytelling and the main characters, the actor that played him, that dude fucking... Yeah. Those 2 things together, this movie was like a can't miss.
I really liked him in The Mist. Mist, one of my favorite movies. But man, he blows himself away in this movie compared to The Mist. Like, he does a great job in The Mist, especially the very last scene. If you've seen The Mist, you know what I'm talking about. He kills that scene. But man, this movie, you realize it's Thomas Jane, and then about 30 minutes into the movie, that goes out the window. That he is this character. This could be a real guy in fucking 1922.
Yeah, and this role actually gives him the ability to shine a lot more than like a regular nowadays role. This is one of those roles where it'll make or break a movie. Like, you have to have somebody who can act this out to make it believable and do a good job. And he definitely did. I just realized he really likes Stephen King grim ending movies.
Yeah. Really interesting fact about Thomas Jane, he was actually supposed to play Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead. This was the original choice for Rick Grimes.
I could see him doing a good job. I know it's weird because Rick Grimes has been Rick Grimes.
Thomas Jane would do a fantastic job at Rick Grimes.
Yeah, I think he might out Rick Grimes.
So, because The Mist was done by Frank Darabont. And Frank Darabont went on to do The Walking Dead. Now, he only did, the first season and like a little bit, maybe the second season before he quit over AMC. But a lot of the actors from The Mist ended up being in The Walking Dead. And Thomas Jane was supposed to be one of those actors as Rick Grimes. I don't remember the details of the story, but I do remember, I want to say it was like a scheduling conflict and he couldn't do it. So they had to look for someone else. But I thought Thomas Jane would have been really good in that role.
Yeah, he plays like a really good, like, tortured soul character.
Mm-hmm. He played the Punisher at one point.
And that is, that's Rick Grimes through a lot of the seasons.
Yeah.
So, I think he could have killed that. I don't know how Rick Grimes' story ends because I never watched the movies or the last couple seasons, but if this guy played him, it would have been rough. It would have been a grim ending.
So Stephen King himself has expressed his satisfaction with this adaptation, stating that he was delighted by the film. He endorsed further adds to the appeal of the movie for fans of his work. So Stephen King likes this, which we know he's been fairly critical to a lot of Stephen King adaptation movies.
Yeah, I actually seen somebody made, it was a critic, or I'm not sure who said it, but they said this movie was like The Shining meets The Tall Tale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
That's so crazy, because that is what I fucking wrote in my fucking rating.
Yeah, I was like, I heard that, and I was like,
Talked about both of those movies. They're both of those things.
Yeah, that's probably one of the better comparisons I've seen of this.
You pulled the rug from out under me, so let's shut it down.
Well, it was somebody else. It wasn't me.
All right, so ratings. Rotten Tomatoes gave this a 92%. IMDb gave it a 6.2 out of 10. Didn't get a letterbox. Forgot to look that up. And the Google average audience rating is a 3.7 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming only on Netflix, unfortunately.
Yeah, like it has been for, 7 years
7
now?
years, yeah. All right, so are you ready to jump into the plot of 1922?
I am, and I would say that in my best 1922 accent, but it would absolutely fucking be so horrendous, I'd make you cut it out.
I noticed that a lot of that accent comes from him keeping his teeth clenched and talking through his teeth. So he be talking like this.
Yeah.
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 My name is Thomas Jane, and I'm a good actor.
It was just how angry men were back then.
He's just so mad he was broke. So we start off, I'm going to go back and edit that and be like, God, why did I do that?
Yeah. See, I was going to do it, and then I was like, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. 1922, I killed my wife. That was pretty good.
Yeah. That was pretty good. Yeah. Much better than I would have.
Yeah, so I'll just do the whole plot like that.
Please do.
So we start.
If you do the whole plot like that, I'll do a version, and we'll just do the whole show that way.
I think my jaw would hurt from clenching my teeth for 2 hours. So we start off in the city of Omaha, Nebraska in the year of 1930. We see that all the men are in suits, women are in dresses. We got cars that you got to start by hand, just driving down dirt roads in the middle of the city. It's very 1930s. We begin following a man as he walks down a crowded sidewalk as he rushes towards a hotel. And this man is our main character, Wilford James, who goes by Wilf. Personally, my name was Wilford. I would go by Fred and not Wilf, but that's just me.
Wilf the MILF.
Wilf the MILF.
I'd hope it be... You call yourself Wilf the Dilf.
Wilf the Dilf.
Gotta have kids.
But our man Wilf is definitely looking a little rough around the edges here. But he checks into this hotel, and as soon as he puts his stuff down, he immediately walks over to the wall, puts his ear against it, and begins to quietly listen. He then sits down at a desk and begins writing on a piece of paper, and we hear Wilf's voiceover as he begins to tell us what he is writing. And it starts out, "To whom it may concern, my name is Wilford Leland James, and this is my confession." I should have did it in the voice. I fucked that up. The screen then goes black, and we get the title card, a handwritten 1922 against a blood red burlap fabric, which I think fits this movie perfectly.
Yeah, I love when movies do this too. When we get like the
future, but we're going to tell the past.
And they're kind of narrating back.
Yeah.
So like something really bad happened to this guy, but you have no idea anything about the character the first time watching it. And even, so I will say, I hadn't seen this movie since the first time I watched it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remembered it so well. Like, I remembered that I liked it so much, I wanted to cover it. But there was some detail stuff I didn't remember. A couple scenes that I definitely didn't forget. But it was really cool kind of going back to that. And then, like, when he goes in to the hotel and he listens to the wall, so like, there's something he's worried about. There's something he's listening for. You could tell he's very scared. He's kind of creeped out. And just seeing that and then getting that cool audience, like, okay, where does things go wrong for this guy?
So Wilf then starts explaining what caused all this, and it all starts with 100 acres of good land located in Hemingford Home, Nebraska. This was inherited by his wife, Arlette, after her father died. Now, Wilf and Arlette already own 80 acres of farmland next to the 100 that Arlette just inherited. So Wilf just planned to farm on the new 180 acres that they both own. Pretty standard conclusion that most people would make. And Wilf is very adamant that he wants to eventually pass this land on to their son Henry, who is only 14 during this time. So the gist of it is, Wilf wants to farm this land until he is too old, then pass it on to Henry, who can farm the land, and so on, planning to keep it in the family for generations. The voiceover then says, in 1922, a man's pride was his land. I gotta do it. In 1922, a man's pride was his land and his son. That was all right.
Yeah, I'll take it.
So we now know that despite the story starting out in 1930, the beginning of all this really begins in 1922. So we are kind of introduced to the James family. We see it's Wilf, his wife Arlette, and his son Henry. They live in a small house on their land and farm corn, with Wilf and Henry doing the farming and Arlette cooking, cleaning, and overall taking care of the home.
Speaking of overall, if anybody was there for the great overall great debate of 2024, good thing we got that covered because there's nothing but overalls in this movie.
Yeah, it was me, you, and Siri that debated that.
Siri tried.
Yeah. Don't say her name too loud. She's going to make an appearance. So we then find out that Arlette doesn't like the farming life and she wants to sell the 100 acres and move to the city of Omaha. And this is the root of our story here. And we see them sitting down at the dinner table and Wilf asks his wife what she plans to do with so much money and no land. She says that they could move to a big city and live there and kind of start over. But Wilf and Henry both scoff at the idea of becoming city boys, and Arlette, who is not pleased that they think her idea is stupid, says that they can talk about it another time. The next day, we see Wilf and Arlette arguing about the land, where Wilf tells his wife she should just leave and go to her mother's house and let him and Henry farm the land, to which she's like, fuck that. He then tells her that he will buy the land from her in payments, estimating that it will take 8 to 10 years to pay off. And she's not down for that either. She then says that she has her own idea of what to do about this situation and tells him that they should sell the 100 acres and their farm to the Farrington Combine, who is offering top dollar for the land at this time. And then they split the money 50-50 in a divorce. This kind of shocks Will for a moment, and once he gets himself together, he asks who Henry would live with if they split up. And she says, a 14-year-old boy needs to live with his mother. You know, back in this time, and especially with a kid who has been raised in the farming life, I would disagree with her.
I would too.
I would think that at 14, it would probably benefit him to live with his dad and learn how to like take care of himself and make money.
But you had to be tough back then.
That's
too.
what I mean.
Like you had to.
Now that's different, but back then he needed to know how to get a trade, a skill that could make him money.
Yeah.
And him and his mom at a dress shop probably not going to be as beneficial as this.
No, that's how you get Norman Bates.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. 1922 was, you had to work to survive.
It's hard out there for a pimp.
It was. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this is, looking back now that we're covering the episode, this is a really important moment because when she talks about selling the land and splitting the money, he actually considers it until his son comes into play. And he mentions that his land, a man's land and son are the two most important things to him. And he actually considers the land part. But when the son's brought in, he turns it down. So that's a very pivotal point I didn't really catch until us going back and covering it.
Well, this leads to an argument between Wilf and Arlette, and Wilf says that he needs a little time to think it over. We then hear his voiceover begin to explain that he had come to hate his wife. The next day, he tells her that she won't be selling the 100 acres without a fight. She then goes to the Farrington Combine about selling the land, and when she returns, She gives Wilf a very smug look because she has convinced the Farrington Company to use their lawyers to fight Wilf in court, and Wilf knows it's not looking good for him.
Yeah, he knows there's no lawyer that he's going to be able to ever afford that's going to be able to.
Yeah.
She also gave him that there's nothing you can fucking do about it look when she was on the way in, and I could feel the boiling from him.
Yeah. Next, we see that Henry, in Wilf's words, has grown sweet on the girl next door, Shannon Coterie. They have been hanging out a lot outside of school. She comes to the house all the time, and Henry even brings her flowers. And this is going to become a very important part of our story here, because Wilf has decided to use this to his advantage.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think, though, if there's one thing that could get him to go along with this plan, it's this, young love.
Yeah. So he approaches Henry and tells him what is going on between him and Arlette, and tells him that if his mom gets her way, that Henry will have to move with her to the city and no longer be able to see Shannon or him. And Henry's like, well, what the hell are we going to do? And in a roundabout way, he basically tells him they're going to have to kill Arlette, which Henry doesn't really want to do. Now, even though Henry doesn't agree with Wilf about killing his mom, this has caused Henry to start treating his mother a little differently. He is obviously mad at her for trying to split the family up and take him away from his home, his father, and his girlfriend.
I don't get why him at this age, he's old enough to decide where he wants to stay.
Yeah.
But you're definitely right in that he doesn't want to do this plan, but he also agrees that something has to be done because he can't leave.
We then get some more scenes of Wilf and Henry working out in the fields, where we see that Wilf is continuously trying to convince Henry to help him, because there is no way that Wilf would be able to pull this off without the help of his son, especially when it comes to the police or his neighbors. So Wilf is kind of steady manipulating Henry into doing this. Later that night at the dinner table, Henry isn't eating, which causes Arlette to get upset. She starts getting on him about it when he suddenly raises his voice at her, causing her to reach across the table and smack him across the face.
The smack that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
That tipped the scales a little bit.
So he then calls her out for trying to split up the family. She then says that the lawyers assured her that the land is hers, she can do whatever she wants with it, and she plans to sell it and move to Omaha. And whether Henry likes it or not, he is coming with her. So she doesn't know it, but she's basically digging her own grave here.
Yeah, I think her plan of opening up a dress shop and making her son leave his life behind, splitting up the family, I think that is selfish to her family. I think both of them are very selfish in how they handle these situations.
You would think as a family they would realize that there needs to be some compromise on both sides, but we kind of get two people that aren't really willing to necessarily come to the table. I mean, she did have a fairly decent plan minus the Henry thing. You know, splitting 50-50, I could see that, getting a divorce, whatever. But the thing with the son, like, you know, it would have been better if they said, well, we'll let Henry decide what he wants to do.
Yeah, that I think that's the best compromise, and that's why I said that conversation was a pivotal point, because selling the 100 acres, splitting the money, them keeping the 80 acres, Wilf and Henry, you know, Henry getting to choose, he's old enough to choose, so him choosing to stay, those two stay there, she takes her money and opens up a dress shop. Obviously, that's the best compromise, but neither one of them are willing to go down that route.
So Henry finally agrees to help Wilf murder Arlette, and a few days later, we see Wilf sitting on the porch with his wife, telling her that Henry talked him into selling the farm and moving to the city with her. And at first, she is kind of confused about Wilf's sudden change of heart, but Wilf convinces her that he is being honest. So this news excites Arlette, and she says that they should celebrate. So we then see them hanging out on the porch, listening to records and drinking some alcohol. Now, when Arlette gets drunk, she says some shit, especially to her son Henry. She starts talking about Shannon, and she says, "If you're not getting a touch of that, you're a fool."
Yeah.
I was like, what?
I'm like, did his mom just tell him he needs to be fucking the neighbor girl? And he's like 14.
I had to rewind it because I was like, did I hear that correctly?
Well, I was gonna rewind it, and then she doubles down on it when she's like, "If you ain't coloring, if you ain't coloring those nipples."
No, she says, if the exact quote, "If my son don't know the color of her nipples, he's a slowpoke." And I was like, excuse me?
Yeah, I gotta say that would bother me a lot hearing my mom say that.
Yeah, she then starts to tell him that he can do whatever he wants, lay her down behind the barn or in the corn, and explore. Just don't stick it in, because he doesn't want her to get pregnant at 14, unless he wants to get locked down like her and Wilf. So this tells us that Arlette and Wilf didn't get married for love. They got married because Wilf knocked her up, which explains why they don't really like each other very much.
Yeah, and it goes back to why he needs his dad in his life too, because these are not things that at 14 years old as a male you want to hear your drunk mom saying.
No.
Not at all.
Very uncomfortable situation. But all this talk about Shannon pisses Henry off, and he quickly pulls away from his mother and runs inside. So a while later, we see Arlette is now very drunk and needs Wilf to assist her to the bedroom. He puts her in bed where she immediately passes out, and it is now time to kill Arlette. But Henry, despite being mad at his mom, starts to talk about finding another way, and Wilf quickly shoots that down by telling him that she will split him and Shannon up and sell the 100 acres to Farrington. And with tears pouring from his eyes, Henry agrees to help his father. Wilf then grabs a butcher knife from the kitchen and they both head upstairs.
Yeah, I think Wilf had some pent up anger there in his choice of using a butcher knife, because he does say that the son suggests, smothering her with the pillow, and he's like, "Oh no, that'll be too painful. That'll take too long.
Getting stabbed with a knife is fine."
Yeah, so you pick up like a 10, 12-inch butcher knife, and that's going to be less painful and less slow. Yeah, I think he had some of that.
Well, he said he hated her.
Yeah, and that look when she came back from the lawyers, I think that was he was going to get some anger out through that knife.
Wilf then orders Henry to place a burlap sack over Arlette's head so he can then cut her throat. And when he does, Arlette immediately starts to struggle. And this causes Wilf to not cut deep enough with the first strike. Wilf and Henry struggle to hold Arlette down, causing Wilf to miss her jugular vein multiple times, but he finally gets a good deep cut, causing Arlette to bleed to death in the bed. We then hear Wilf's voiceover say, "In 1922, I murdered my wife, and my son aided me." We also cut back to 1930 Wilf, where he stares out of the window and admits that he regrets having his son help him in the murder the most. And we will eventually find out why he regrets that so much.
Yeah, this whole scene, for one, the practical effects on the throat cut, super good.
Yeah.
With the dark lighting, the natural lighting too. Thought it looked really good. But I loved how it was so realistic. Like, of somebody trying to cut somebody's throat in the fight that they're putting up. And,
somebody that also doesn't realize how difficult it can be to actually kill somebody sometimes.
Yeah, it's not like the movies, people still have to bleed out, even if you get it right on the first one. And of course he doesn't, because he doesn't expect her to put up as much of a fight. And I thought they did a really good job at making it not only realistic, but showing how traumatic it was for the both of them. Neither one of them expected it to go that bad, but especially for Henry.
So we then jump back to 1922, where we see Henry and Wilf carrying the body outside. Wilf says that they are going to throw her into an old dry well, to which Henry isn't happy about, and then he suddenly faints, leaving Wilf to throw her in by himself. We then cut to Wilf and Henry using soapy water and hard bristle brushes to scrub all of the blood from the floor of the house, which takes them all night and into the morning. We also see Wilf pack Arlette's favorite clothes and some personal belongings into a suitcase and toss it down into the well. When he looks down at Arlette's body, he sees a horrendous sight, as she is surrounded by all of these rats, when suddenly a fucking big-ass rat comes crawling out of her mouth. And this is one of my favorite shots of the film.
Yeah, this looks awesome. It's super creepy because her mouth is like kind of making these noises and it's slowly opening up. And then you realize you see the tail.
Well, the tail flops out at first and I thought it was a snake. And then you see, so the rat is like backing up out of her mouth. So you see the tail, then you see his like legs pop out and then his ass and then him just kind of come out the rest of the way. And then he shakes his fur off because he's like obviously covered in her blood. Great scene.
Yeah, she looked awesome in this scene too. They even zoom in on her face and it looked really good, really creepy. So the whole rat thing becomes extremely important in the story. I think that this is also when he yells at the rats and throws, I forgot what he threw down there at him.
Through the suitcase.
I thought that this kind of showed some remorse, or maybe not remorse, but
some respect.
He still had some feeling for her deep down. Like she wasn't just nothing to him. He still he wanted her body respected. Mm-hmm. You know, he was pissed that these rats were on her body.
So after this, we see Wilf very carefully craft this realistic story of Arlette packing her things and leaving in the middle of the night, taking off on foot so as not to wake him up, where he would obviously try to stop her. And he makes sure that the evidence in the house reflects this story, which is pretty smart, because he knows that the sheriff is going to come out at some point and look around. Some days later, a car pulls up to the farm where a lawyer representing Farrington Combine gets out and attempts to speak to Arlette. But Wilf plays this off pretty smart here. He asks the lawyer why his wife sent him to the farm. And the lawyer's like, she didn't. We actually came to speak to her because she was supposed to meet with us about selling the land. But Wilf's like, she left, we have no idea where she went, and you can fuck off. But the lawyer isn't falling for it because they were going to pay her a shit ton for this land. Why would she just take off without getting the money? The lawyer then asks to look inside the house, and Wilf says, fuck no. The lawyer then tells him that this isn't finished and leaves the farm. After he leaves, Henry then asks about filling in the well, and Wilf tells him not just yet, because after the lawyer gets back to town, he's sure the sheriff is going to head out here next, and a freshly filled in well is going to make him suspicious. So they got to set up a story on why it got filled in, which is really smart on Wilf's part.
Yeah. Everything that he does in planning this is really smart, and it goes over super smooth.
Yeah.
And that's one of the awesome things about this movie is they get past it and you're like, okay, everything went really good. What's going to go wrong? You know something goes wrong based off of, and that's why I said I love when they skip to the present time and then they tell the story backwards. But yeah, I mean, it's extremely well thought out.
Well, it kind of paints the picture to the viewer that this is not going to be a story where a man murders his wife and there's a cop, on the hunt. Some person's going to figure it out. It tells you that this story is going in a very ghost direction because they're very quickly eliminating the possibility of anyone finding this out.
Yeah, and here in a minute, we're going to get to the point where everything goes over smooth and they've kind of gotten away with it. And I remembered kind of the ghost side of things. Yeah. But I didn't remember in detail. And as a viewer, so I was back sitting there like, what could possibly go wrong? Everything went perfect. And my one thought was the son. Man, that had to have some type of lasting effect on him.
So we then cut to Wilf and Henry walking one of their cows over to the well. where they direct her onto the wooden lid. And after standing there for a few moments, the lid gives way, breaking, causing the cow to fall down into the well, covering up Arlette's body and giving a good reason on why the well is getting filled in. Poor cow, man.
Poor cow. I'd put that exact thing in my notes.
The fucking fall didn't even kill it. It laid there in like extreme pain until Wilf shot it. It was really sad.
Yeah, it shows a lot too. The son kind of freaks out and it's like, do something. And that's kind of a similar situation to what happened with the mom.
Yeah.
So you can already show that whole situation's kind of already having a major effect on him.
So later on, just as Wilf predicted, Sheriff Jones arrives to the farm looking into Arlette's disappearance. So we immediately see that Wilf and the sheriff are on pretty good terms. And despite what the lawyer wanted done, the sheriff said no, and that he would ride out here by himself and ask if he could look around. Wilf explains that he has nothing to hide and will let the sheriff look wherever he wants. But he didn't allow the lawyer inside because he works for Farrington, who Wilf hates, and the sheriff completely understands this. So the sheriff goes inside and begins his investigation, and he talks to Wilf and Henry about Arlette just leaving in the middle of the night, and overall doesn't find anything suspicious. He is pretty satisfied with the story of Arlette just taking off, and he says his goodbyes and heads off down the road. So it seems that Wilf and Henry have officially gotten away with murder. So after a few nights later, we see that Wilf gets woken up by the cows in the barn mooing loudly. Assuming some kind of animal or intruder is outside, he grabs his gun and lantern and heads out to check. While inside the barn, he finds a rat is chewing on one of the cow's nipples. I guess it would be a nipple.
It's a udder.
Oh, fuck. I was about to say, I'm not super familiar with cows or cow anatomy.
That cow's nipple
but I have heard udder before, yeah.
That cow's nipple is utterly fucked.
Yeah, it's pretty much chewed off.
Yeah, it's like these rats got a taste of like
blood.
Eating, taste of blood, taste of meat.
They're blood-ravaged rats.
Now the body's obviously eaten up. They're going after the livestock.
But when Wilf shines the light under the cow, the rat takes off running into a pipe. Wilf chases it with his gun in hand, and when he goes to look down the pipe for the rat, he is literally put on his ass from the smell of decomposition, because that pipe leads directly into the now filled-in well. He then stuffs a sack into the pipe to keep the rats from being able to escape, with plans to fill it in with concrete later. As he is then walking back into the house, he sees the silhouette of Arlette standing in the hallway. But when he shines the light of the lantern in that direction, it is revealed to be Henry asking his dad what is going on. So we then cut back to 1930 in the hotel room, where we see Wilf suddenly stop writing. And as he turns around, we see a crack form in the wall that quickly becomes bigger and bigger until finally a rat comes crawling out of the hole. After a moment, Wilf just goes back to writing. So he then explains that after the rat in the barn incident, Henry came home from school and informed his dad that Shannon was now pregnant. And this drastically changes things. So of course, Henry's like, we can just get married. We're 15. You know, in the 1920s, people became an adult at 10.
I'm surprised that's not what they just did.
I mean, shit, Shannon's practically like an old hag at this point. But Wilf points out that they don't have any money. And Henry responds that they would have if Wilf would have let Arlette sell that 100 acres. So Henry has now changed sides, it seems. And while this is going on, Wilf spots a bright blue Cadillac driving up to the farmhouse. And this is Shannon's father, Harlan Coterie. And he is kind of like the rich farmer in the town of Hemingford. And despite him and Wilf being friends, Wilf is secretly jealous of him. He then tells Henry to go inside and that he will try to do the best for him, to which Henry responds, "You better. And I took this as a possible blackmail.
That's a threat.
Yeah.
That's a threat. Like, you better fix this shit or, I'm going to spill the beans.
I'm gonna tell. So Harlan's like, here's the deal. I'm gonna send Shannon up to the Catholic Home for Girls in Omaha until she has the baby. Then they will adopt the baby out and then Shannon can come home. So Wilf asked what Harlan needs from him, and Harlan says that he knows Wilf doesn't have much money, so he is willing to cut him some slack. Shannon's staying at the Catholic home for 4 months is going to cost $300. So he wants Wilf to pay $75 of this $300, which I personally think is a pretty good deal for Wilf, only having to pay a quarter of something that is half your fault. It's not too bad.
No, but I would have been like, you can fucking suck a dick.
Oh, wow.
No, I took that wrong. So, I don't think that Wilf is, I don't think he's not about sending her off. Like, that's not his idea. That's all, her dad's freaking out. That's his idea. I would be like, no, I don't have the money to pay for that. And I don't think that she should be sent off to, like, especially with his son. He knows that this is going to be really bad for his son. Like, he's going to freak out. And he knows his son has a very big secret. And you need to keep him as happy as possible. I would have tried to convince him to keep her here.
Well, I think the problem is, and why I don't have an issue with him sending her off, is she's a 14-year-old, and this is her family. I don't think she's necessarily old enough to be like, okay, you guys can just fucking get married and raise a baby at 14.
I feel like they did that a lot back in the 20s. Like, it was common for...
I don't know if it was common, like 14-year-olds.
Especially in, like, farmland areas.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that this would be a life-altering bad decision for her being 14, him being 14, to have a baby.
Yeah, I don't think having the baby is a great idea, but they could still adopt the baby out, even if they didn't want to keep it. But her going and staying somewhere else,
it's only for 4 months.
It's just to split those two up, though. She's already pregnant.
Well, no, I don't think it's to split them up. I think it's to hide from everybody that his 14-year-old daughter's pregnant.
Well, I would be like, that's... If you want to hide a family secret that bad, it's going to cost you money. Like, I'm not sending my son off to hide something. They're two different classes, clearly. You have a lower class, they struggle, they barely get by. And then you have this guy and his daughter, they clearly live, they're like middle class, they're upper middle class. He's got he even talks about it. He's driving around the brand new car, and he's got the nice new painted barn, and I don't think that Wilf would really care if the tables were turned and it was his daughter. I don't think he would be trying to send her off to hide the fact that she got pregnant. I think this is more of a upper class. He doesn't want to make it look bad to people in town, so he's going to try to hide his daughter for 4 months. And I would be like, man, if that's your decision, that's your decision. But your daughter was, she knew the consequences and she got pregnant.
Well, of course, Wilf is like, I don't have it. And Harlan says, you better come up with it. And Wilf asks, what if he doesn't? And Harlan says, if you don't pay, then you just don't pay. I'm not going to hassle you for it. But I know, and you know, that you could pay, and you got to live with that. So I looked it up, and $75 in 1922 would be $1,407 today.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The $300 would be $5,630 for 4 months. I'm like, damn, what is she going to, a fucking high class? Is she going to the Ritz?
And he's paying that much money just to hide the fact that she got pregnant to town. And that's kind of that's shitty. I also think the way he went about it, when he showed up there and was like, no, you're gonna pay this.
Well, he's pissed, man. Somebody just knocked up his fucking little girl. Like, she's not even like a woman yet. She's like 14.
Yeah, but his son is also a kid too. I mean, they're two kids that made a stupid decision. But I mean, that's a lot of money. Like, you just did the math. This guy don't have that. They're fucking broke. they're like struggling to get by. I do like the way he ended the conversation, which is, if you don't have it, there's nothing I'm gonna do.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not gonna send somebody to break your fucking legs for it. But back then your reputation was a lot, and he basically says like, you're gonna have to live with that. And I think that comes back to because he's kind of jealous of Harlan. Is he essentially doesn't want to be looked at as a lesser man, and I think this is why the decision where Wilf tries to get the money, because he does try to get the money to pay. Like, I think he realizes like, man, this isn't going to look good. So Harlan leaves and Wilf tells Henry what's going to happen. And of course, Henry's not having it. And he says that they will just run away. And Wilf's like, fuck no, you won't. Like, that's stupid. And you don't have any money to just run away. Plus, she's 5 months pregnant. She cannot go on the run. And Henry gets heated over this and tells Wilf that he can't tell him what to do and that he couldn't even cut Arlette's throat without fucking it up. Henry then goes to leave the room and yells to Wilf that he cursed it all and he cursed him. His son is throwing a gigantic fit and has now brought this murder into this argument, and these two don't have anything to do with each other. So
no, but this is why I also said when the neighbor told me he was going to send his daughter away and then get rid of the baby, I would have, whether I agreed with that or not, I would have known how Henry was going to take this news, and I would have tried to stop that at all costs, because obviously this is a big deal. He's worried. This is Henry's turned against him.
Yep. So the next day, Wilf searches the house for any money Arlette may have hidden, where he finds $40, which is a little over half of what he owes Harlan. So he heads into town to try to get a loan for the rest of the money, but the bank doesn't want to loan him $35. No, they want him to take out a loan on his land for $750.
That's a salesman right there.
Yeah. Wilf doesn't take this deal, but he tells the bank manager that he will think about it. He then leaves, but when he reaches the parking lot, he discovers that his truck is gone. And Henry has left him a note, which says, I'm taking the truck. You know where I'm going. Leave me alone. And if you send the sheriff after me, I will tell him everything. He also says, I still love you even though I don't know why, because what you had me do has brought me nothing but misery. Love, Henry Hank James.
I wonder, because Wilf says, I got to talk about it with my son. He's old enough where he should be in on these decisions.
He's having babies now.
Yeah, but I wonder if Wilf was going to talk to Henry about possibly taking that $750 and letting him run off with her, because he can't let this secret come out. And
I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until just now, but I do wonder, because he considers the $750 and he says, I have to talk to my son about it. I wonder if he was going to talk to his son about possibly hooking him up with some money just to kind of let them have the baby and get this, kind of kick the can down the road. Because if you remember, he talked Henry into killing their mom with his girlfriend. That's what he got him to do it for. And now she's gone, and now Henry's world's falling apart.
Yeah, that's a good point. So needless to say, this fucks Wilf up pretty bad. So later that night, while reading a book, he thinks he sees a drop of blood land on the page. But when he jumps up in surprise, he looks up only to see that his roof is now leaking. He tries to go to bed, but he keeps hearing the house making noises, imagining a dead Arlette walking around, and the sounds of all of those rats crawling everywhere. Honestly, the rat thing is like a big reason that I like this movie, because it kind of fucks me up. Like, I don't like it. It's weird. It almost doesn't make sense, but I like this part of the movie because I don't like it, because it creeps me out.
Yeah, I love the rats. The rats they're like they symbolize his wife, And that's how she lets him know that she is there all the time. And we know at this point in the movie that even into the future, these rats are still coming after him. Like he goes in this hotel, he's listening to the wall to see if he hears any. By this point, they've done broke through the wall and there's rats coming in the room. This is the embodiment of her letting him know that she is always there haunting him. And you got to think at this point, he's losing livestock. He's lost, so the land's no good if you can't make money off of it. He's lost his son. His son's taken off. Like, everything is falling apart.
Yeah, the thing, man, for the rats is, like, I would hate if, like, I was having to deal with rats all the time. They creep me out. I hate their little fucking tails. I hate the fact that they could bite the shit out of you. And they got, like, diseases and shit in there. And there's so many of them. Like, you could literally be overwhelmed by rats and fucking they could kill you because there's just so many. It just creeps me out. A few days later, Sheriff Jones shows up to the house and informs Wilf that 3 days ago in a town called Lime Bisca, someone found Wilf's truck, which is the one that was stolen by Henry. And at the same time, a young man robbed a grocery store and stole $23. Now, obviously, the sheriff thinks this is Henry, but Wilf adamantly denies that his son would do something like this. Sheriff Jones then tries to offer a rebuttal, but this sets Wilf off and he politely asks the sheriff to leave. And he does. We start to see Wilf begin to unravel as he starts drinking alcohol. He then notices that the roof leak has gotten worse. He then realizes he needs work to get his mind off of everything, but it is now winter and there's no farming to be done. So he decides to go to the bank, accept the $750 loan, and use it to do some repairs around the house to keep himself busy. So once he returns home with the money, he goes to put it up in the closet, and while reaching back behind a hat case, he gets bitten on the hand by a big-ass fucking rat. And he does what I would definitely do. He throws the rat on the floor and stomps the ever-loving shit out of that thing.
Bro, he curb stomped that fucking rat into an oblivion. Like, it no longer exists. It is like atomized into the air.
And I don't blame him.
Yeah, it bit the shit out of him.
Fuck yeah.
And even something small too, when you're talking about practical effects, the way they did that bite, man, it's one of those small things that we talk about where it's like, we can watch somebody get cut in half and we're like, cool, but then we see something like that.
Small,
and I don't know if it's because it's a rat too, makes it even worse.
Well, that's my worst fear with a rat. It's like, it bites me and I didn't even know it was there. And it's in my fucking room.
Yeah, and this rat's got like fucking horse teeth or something.
Yeah.
And it's like biggest fucking teeth on a rat you've ever seen.
So we then see his hand that got bit. And like we're saying, it's really bad. So the rat bit like that little thin area between your thumb and your index finger. I don't know why I'm doing it like people could see me, but I'm showing you.
He is showing you through the mic.
Which sounds like really painful. But this thing's pouring blood and it looks really bad. He should definitely go to the hospital, but he doesn't. But now that his hand is fucked up, he can't work on the house, which means he can't keep himself busy and block out all of the terrible thoughts about what is going on. And he is now by himself. So Wilf is in some trouble here. Oh, and back in 1930, Wilf looks over at that hole in the wall that the rat crawled out of, and we see there is many more rats back there just staring at him through that little hole and making those fucking creepy ass rat sounds.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could hear that because I actually cranked up the surround sound for it, and you could hear the rats through the wall. Even when they first crack through, it's very faint, but you can hear it in the background.
Ew.
Yeah, it's gross. Now at this point, you got hundreds of rats. So you know these rats are very important.
Yeah. So we fast forward a little bit and we see that Wilf has his hand all bandaged up. He's drinking tons of alcohol. It has started snowing a lot and the area of the roof that had the leak is now a big ass hole where snow is falling through into the living room. As Wilf sits in the house freezing, he can tell his hand is not healing well. He then unwraps it, and we can see that it has become very, very badly infected. His hand kind of looks like Swiss cheese. It's pretty bad. This image is going to live rent-free in my fucking head anytime I ever see a rat from here on out. So he quickly realizes that he needs some serious medical attention. He runs outside into a blizzard and attempts to hand start his Model T, but it refuses to crank. He begins freezing and then runs back inside to warm up by the stove. While sitting there, the front door begins to open and shut, and at first he assumes it is like the wind from the blizzard, but then he starts to hear music, and as he stares at the door, he catches a glimpse of a dead Arlette standing on the porch, and this looks awesome.
Yeah, this is the beginning of what was the most memorable part of this movie, watching it the first time, and what I think is the best sequence of the entire movie.
So this freaks him out really bad, and he begins stumbling through the house. He then looks into the kitchen where she is walking right towards him. He gets freaked out and he tries to hide in the basement, but he trips on the steps and goes tumbling down until he slams into the wall at the bottom of the staircase. A very gross, bloody, and pale Arlette then begins walking towards him with an army of rats around her. She's the queen of rats now.
The cinematography on this, like from his point of view, looking up at her with this fucking just river of rats running under her feet as she creeps down the steps, and she looks awesome.
Yeah,
like she looks super gross, and like part of her face is like eaten, her skin's like decomposed and shit, and she's rolling with a entire fucking like World War III sized army of rats.
So Wilf stares in fear and disbelief at his dead wife as she slowly makes her way down the stairs. Once she makes it down to him, she leans in real close, opens her jaw, and snaps her teeth right into Wilf's ear as he coils in fear. The screen goes black and we hear Wilf's voiceover say that she whispered secrets to him that only a dead woman would know. She begins whispering into his ear what happened to Henry after he ran away. And we see Henry put on a mask and rob that grocery store the sheriff mentioned, then use that money to buy a gun so he could start robbing banks and other stores. He then steals a car, drives to the Catholic school, gets Shannon, and they run off together, where in order to survive, they continue robbing stores until the newspaper puts them on the front page, branding them the Sweetheart Bandits. Then one day, while eating at a diner, they get recognized by some of the staff. Henry pulls a gun and they run off as they walk through the parking lot, a man goes after them, shooting Shannon in the stomach, killing the baby. Henry then puts a very injured Shannon in the backseat of a car and drives off. Henry ends up wrecking the car into a ditch because of the snow on the ground. They then find an abandoned house where Henry puts a bleeding Shannon on a mattress on the floor. He goes outside to gather some firewood so they can warm up, but when he returns, he finds Shannon dead. He then lays next to her and shoots himself in the head. So now Shannon and Henry are both gone. That is a wrap for the Sweetheart Bandits and a great example of why 15-year-olds are fucking stupid. And we don't have any 15-year-old listeners, I'm pretty sure, so I don't think anybody's going to take that to heart.
Man, poor Henry, though. Like,
yeah, he's had a bad... It hasn't even been a year.
It hasn't. He didn't want to kill his mom, but he didn't want to leave this girl behind. He also didn't want to leave his dad behind, but the main force was this girl that he was in love with.
Got to follow that tang.
And, he did. Followed it until he left a baby inside of it. But you can tell, and it's really sad when they go to kill the mom. Right before he does it, he like I think he leans over and gives her a kiss, and he's like, goodbye, Mom.
Yeah, he says goodbye.
And it's really sad. So he kills his mom for this girl, and now he has had to watch her get shot. She tells him, like, the baby's dead. and now he watches her die. Man, I feel bad for him. Like and you can only imagine as his dad, like how antagonizing that would be.
So after she tells Wilf this, he begs her to please just kill him. And she thinks about it for a moment, but she decides that he hasn't suffered quite enough yet. So after all this, we jump forward a little bit, where we see Sheriff Jones driving Wilf into town. He's obviously very sick from the rat bite, looking pretty close to death. And then we see Wilf laying in a hospital bed, definitely looking better, except for the fact that he had to have his left hand amputated. So his days of fixing tractors and farming are most likely done, or at least very limited.
Yep. He has now lost his son. His land is useless to him now. Not useless, but the livestock has now started dying, so it's pretty much useless. He can't get the money out of it. He needs to survive. And interesting enough, that hand was the hand that he used to cut his wife's throat.
I did not catch that. It was a good catch.
It's gone.
So while recovering in the hospital, Sheriff Jones shows up to give him one last bit of news. 2 days ago, a man driving down the road noticed something in a ditch. He stopped and looked, where he discovered that it was a dead woman's body. This woman matched Arlette's description, but she was too far decomposed to be sure. The medical examiner noticed that she was missing her back teeth, so Sheriff Jones is here to ask Wilf if his wife was missing her back teeth, to which he realizes that this is his chance to 100% get away with the murder. So he says, yep, that's her.
It's crazy because at this point, that's the last thing even on his mind. It's like his wife with this curse dropped a perfect clearing of his name, like into his lap. His son's dead. Now the police have this essentially solved, so they think, leaving him forever to live out in misery with the secret of what he's done.
Yeah. Well, I think there's maybe possibly another side to this coin too. So to the outside world, Wilf is looking pretty pitiful right now. His wife ran out on him and ended up getting robbed and murdered. His son ran off, became a criminal, getting his 15-year-old pregnant girlfriend killed and then killing himself. And Wilf gets sick from a rat bite, his house falls apart, and he loses his hand. And back in those days, men had a lot of pride, especially in their land and family. So I think that this is another punishment, even though it seems like he got away with it. But back then, men didn't want to be pitied. Like when you were the guy in town, where everyone was always whispering about how shitty your life is and your situation, that wasn't good back then. I don't know if it's necessarily good now, but back then it was a really big deal for you not to be able to keep your shit together, keep your land together, make money, have a good family, have a son to leave your shit to, and now he has none of this. And even though it looks like this gift dropped in his lap where now he doesn't have to worry about the murder thing, in reality, everyone pities him and he becomes kind of the guy that everybody whispers about when he's around.
Yeah, I don't think it was a gift dropped in his lap at all.
No, it kind of seems like that though, but then when you get into it deep, you realize it's actually just another fucking trick, man. It's another punishment.
I think it was definitely, it's a really good point. People definitely didn't want to be pitied. And he spent so much time. I know he worried a lot about his son. He covered up for his son and didn't help the police try to find him, probably because he was worried his son might get caught and talk. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, essentially now he is forever stuck with this.
He's almost like the town loser.
Yeah, his wife, he has lost everything that he killed his wife for in the first place, plus more. And he is she wouldn't even put him out of his misery like he asked. He is now stuck living this life with this secret for forever.
So next we jump to the 18th of December, right before Christmas, and Henry's body arrives by train. A very broken Wilf heads to the train station to pick him up when he is suddenly ambushed by reporters, which obviously fucks him up. And, I think most people could agree that would really suck. We then jump to the funeral director showing Wilf Henry's body, and when he pulls that sheet back, holy shit. His right eye is completely gone. His nose is gone. His lips and half his chin is missing. And we see all of these bloody scratches on his face. Wilf is shocked by this, and the funeral director tells him that the rats got to the bodies days before they were discovered. Wilf, who is now in this trance, just tells the director to fix him up and put him in the finest coffin they have. The director tries to explain that there isn't any way to fix his face, but Wilf just repeats himself and tells him that he has the money, and he just pretty much somberly walks out of the room. Next, we see him briefly attend Shannon's funeral, where all of the seats are full. Harland and his wife are taking it very hard, and nobody really acknowledges Wilf. We then cut to Henry's funeral, where no one came to pay the respects, and only Wilf was in attendance. Honestly, with all of the bad things that have happened, your child dying and nobody giving a shit. I mean, not even anyone to comfort Wilf.
Well, he's hated now. His son's hated for all the shit that he did.
But you would think, at least I would hope, that if my kid did something really bad, that at least my best friend or something may not agree with what my kid did, but would at least be there to help me get through such a bad time.
Yeah, he doesn't have any best friends anymore. And also, a lot of people, the guy that lives next door, which is much higher in society, they see his son as the one who just got his pregnant daughter killed. So everybody hates it. Nobody wants to go to that funeral. So on top of everything, now he's the only one at his son's funeral. Nobody else wants to be there.
For something so bad to happen to you and to be completely alone through it, that's got to be a whole new level of hell.
Yeah, and this is at the point in the movie where you're like, okay, everything has been taken from this guy.
It's okay.
What else could go wrong for him?
Yeah, this was the point in the movie where, I went from well, he deserved that, I'm like, okay. I think we might have met our limit here, but no, just keep going.
But the poetic justice continues.
But Wilf does look back at one point in the church, and what does he see? A very dead Arlette sitting there surrounded by rats. So she attended, and her rat army. So after the funeral, we see Wilf just sitting in his living room, drinking as the snow falls through the hole in the roof. We also see that the barn roof has collapsed, and there is a cow living in the house with him, which, honestly, I don't blame him for the cow. He's probably sick of being by himself, and when you are tortured by the thoughts of what you did and what you caused, being by yourself is probably a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, this cow legit is, at this point in the movie, the only thing that he has, to where he doesn't even try to get the house out. It becomes his pet.
Yeah, fuck it. He then heads to Harlan's house, where he finds him wrapped in a blanket, drinking a bottle of whiskey on his porch. He attempts to sell him the 100 acres for $500, but Harlan says that, much like Wilf, he now has no wife because she left him, and a dead child, and he believes that the 100 acres is cursed. He then tells Wilf to just sell it to the bank, but Wilf doesn't want to do that because he knows that they will just sell it to Farrington. And as we know, Wilf fucking hates Farrington Combine, and he would rather sell it for a loss than sell it to them. Which, I think the real reason he doesn't want to sell it to them is it would make all that he has done pointless.
Well, he talks about it in the beginning that he doesn't want her to initially sell the land to them because they were going to open up like this pig slaughter or something, and it was going to make it really hard. They were essentially going to be able to out business him. It was going to make it hard for him. But the really poetic thing about this is he kills his wife to avoid her selling to them, and now he can't even sell the property to anybody but them. Like, how fucked up is that? That you can't even sell. You can't even get somebody to buy it and take a major loss. The only people that will now buy the land is the people that you killed your wife to avoid the land going to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all this death and bad shit that he has caused just to keep the land from Farrington. It would all be for nothing if he basically let them get it.
I think he has some jealousy too of Farrington. I think they kind of hint at it in the movie that they're like a really successful big business, and they're kind of putting like the smaller
little guy,
businesses
yeah.
out.
They're the Walmart of Nebraska.
Exactly. He doesn't want to sell the land off to them. But now it's the only people who he can sell the land off to.
But Wilf pleads his case when Harlan then stands up, looks down at him, and tells him to leave and never come back, to which Wilf agrees. Once Wilf returns home, he finds the last of his family in a dire situation. His roommate, the cow, has collapsed outside and is slowly dying. He then goes in to get his gun when he discovers his house is now infested with rats. He then puts the cow out of its misery, and as he stands up and stares off into the distance, we hear the voiceover say, "That was the end of 1922. So all of this shit happened in the span of 1 year.
Yeah.
It was just like when I heard that, I was like, damn, I didn't realize we are still in the same year. There's a lot of shit to happen.
Yeah, I agree. The first time I watched this, I didn't remember that. And when it came up, I was like, oh my God, you think this takes place over a couple years' time? No, this has been the same year.
Yeah.
Like, everything has went so bad in 1 year.
Well, we went from the beginning of the summer where they started growing the corn, and now we're in winter.
Yeah, that's 6 months.
Yeah.
All this shit's happened in 6 months. Makes you wonder, too, if his neighbor had some really bad karma, too, because he talks about it, how in the beginning of the year, they both had their kids, they had their land, they had wives, and they were happy. And now their whole lives are flipped upside down.
What do you think happened to the cow?
I think that this is something to do with the curse. I think
the rats killed the cow.
Yeah, I think the rats may give it a disease. Well, the rats are his wife. That's one thing you notice is, and it's why it's so haunting when you see in the present time, in the 30s, they're still like harassing him. Because those rats are his wife. That's why every time he sees her ghost, those rats are there with her. So yeah, I think it was her.
I think that cow brought him just a little bit of something.
It's all he had left.
It's all he had left, and they obviously killed it, but they didn't kill it. They just killed it enough to make him come out and have to shoot it.
To have to put it out of his misery.
Yeah, this is just more salt in the wound. You know, we don't ever officially find out what happened to the cow, but I think we're on the right track here.
Or it was the ghost of the first cow getting revenge on him.
Or that. We then jump back to 1930, where we see Wilf still writing at the desk, but when he turns around, we see that his room is full of rats. He then continues the rest of the story where he tells us that he ended up losing the farm to, you guessed it, Farrington Combine, where they plan to bulldoze the place and build a brand new slaughterhouse. He then says that Harlan was able to hang on a little longer, but he too eventually had his farm taken by the bank in 1925. Wilf then moved to Omaha, which is extremely ironic considering selling the farm and moving there is what started this whole thing. But when he got there, he got a job in a factory hauling pallets for a little over a year. But everywhere he went, the rats would follow. he began drinking a lot, and it only took 2 years for him to burn through the money that he got from selling the 100 acres. While in the city, he also visited some of the places Henry robbed, which you could imagine didn't go so well. He then thinks back to that day on the porch where everything changed, admitting that his son was right, there was another way. And with that, he finishes up his confession, leaving it on the desk. Wilf then sits on the floor and begins crying, thinking back about his wife and son. He then hears Henry's voice say, "Pa, it will be quick." As he then looks up, he sees the mutilated ghost of Shannon, Arlette, and Henry as Henry pulls the butcher knife from his belt. And us eagle-eyed viewers will notice that it is the same knife that he killed Arlette with. And the screen goes black as we hear the final voiceover say, "In the end, we all get caught." And that is the end of Stephen King's 1922.
His son tells him, too, when he holds the knife out, he says, "It'll be quick," which is the same thing he told his son when he was going to kill his wife with it.
I love that it's the same knife. It's that like yellow handle, medium-sized butcher knife, because we see him, he goes through all their butcher knives and picks this one, and it is the same one. I do have something kind of cool about this ending coming up here in a second, though. So
I thought for one, I thought this was an amazing ending. I love dark endings.
It is.
And I think probably the creepiest, or maybe the second creepiest shot of the whole entire movie is when he looks back and they're all three standing there.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but the way they did these ghosts, so they're like spirits, but they're in solid form. And they're completely rotted, decayed, eat up by rats. Like, it's fucking gnarly looking. They're scary as fuck. And this is why I said this movie, they're really selective with their scary moments. But when they have them, they're so good, they're legitimately scary. It's like, holy if you put yourself in that spot, that would be terrifying.
Yeah, and this is also the first and only time we get to see Shannon after being eaten by the rats.
And she's fucked.
Yeah, they're all pretty rough.
And that, the rats being his wife, that's her showing that she's always there. And to know that he left and, was an alcoholic for 2 years, worked these different jobs. No matter where he goes, even into this hotel room, they literally rip through the wall and there's thousands of them in there, that he can't even move on and try to start another life. Every day of his life, he is reminded of what he's done by his wife through these rats.
I'm really surprised that he lasts that long.
Yeah.
He really does go quite some time because, as we said earlier, we only see, not even a year of the story, but he actually lasts like 7 years. So, there was a lot of him just kind of being harassed by these rats and these ghosts, and he did put up with it for probably a lot longer than most people.
Yeah, so watching the movie after he has to put down the cow, which you can tell really hurts him. That's like the only family. He has replaced his family now. He's replaced that void the best way he could, the only way he could, with the cow that decided to move into the house. When he has to put that cow down, I was like, okay, that's it for me. Like, I would have drew the line there. You have no other family. Your land's useless. Especially, you can't even sell it. You have nothing left in your life. That's it. Like, I'm taking the cheap way home.
Yeah, especially if I knew I was going to lose my land. I think I'd probably go this route before I lost it.
Well, I thought about, would you sell it first or try to sell the land before you did it? And it's like, he has no family to even... His whole thing was his legacy and passing this land on to his son. Yeah. He talks in depth about that in the beginning of being able to leave this land to his son. And he no longer has a legacy. Not only is everything in his life is gone, but his legacy that he was leaving behind, he has nobody to even leave the land to.
Nope. So, Hemmingford Home is not only the setting for this story, but is also the residence of Mother Abigail Fremantle in The Stand, which I love The Stand, and the adult version of Ben Hanscom, the architect from It.
Huh.
Yeah. This is Thomas Jane's third starring role in a film based on works by Stephen King. The other two is being The Mist and Dreamcatcher from 2003. So he likes to be in Stephen King shit.
He does enjoy Stephen King shit.
So, here we go. This next one is from the end of the novella.
Oh, I know what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, so Wilfred sits in a hotel room in Omaha, writing down his story and claiming that the corpses of Arlette, Henry, and Shannon are present. Wilfred plans to commit suicide before the rats consume him, but apparently misplaces his gun. The story ends with a newspaper clipping about Wilfred's death, stating that he was found with bite marks that appeared to be self-inflicted. This leaves the reader to speculate about whether Wilfred's account was true or delusional. Wilfred's confession is found to be ineligible and because it had been chewed to pieces. So he writes this whole confession of everything that happened.
It's no longer legible because they chewed it all up. Yeah.
It's destroyed.
Yeah. So I did hear most of that, the newspaper clipping, that he had essentially been found with he had bit himself to death.
Yeah.
Which
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. It makes you wonder, and it's very, they didn't put this in the movie part, but for the book, it's very, how much of this was in his head? How much of this was he fucked up from the events of killing his wife that spiraled out of control?
Yeah, I came across that because I seen some people talking about the book, and somebody had mentioned that in the end of the book, when they found him dead, that his writings, you couldn't make sense of it, right? And I originally thought, and I really kind of wish that it would have went this way, was that whole time he's sitting, he's really just scribbling and not actually writing anything. Which I would have that would have made it seem like he's real fucking crazy. And he literally just sat down like he was writing something, but, in reality, he was just doing scribbles on a piece of paper. And that would have been really cool, but then I actually looked at the actual end of the novella, and it's not that he was scribbling, it's just because it was destroyed.
Well, actually, I like the way that they did it in the book, because...
Was it him? Was it the rat?
Well, it's like, that the sheriff comes and he's like, hey, we found this body, and it's kind of like he's now cleared. He's never going to have to worry about this. He's going to have this on his chest, and he's going to live in misery for the rest of his life. And it obviously means a lot to him that it's bearing on him, that in his suicide note, he is going to admit to what he did and tell the whole story. And as his last wish is to leave this note of what really happened, the rats eat it up. So no matter what, he can never get this out. He's gone. I thought it was kind of just that it was just so dark that way.
Yeah, I mean, no matter which way, which, obviously only one way is correct, but either way, I really like the fact that this story, when he finally is going to get it off his chest, he can't.
Yep.
And that's what makes it so great.
Yeah, I do wish that the movie at least would have did one final shot of his note that he had been writing just shredded up by rats.
Yeah.
Rats all over the desk chewing it up or something.
I think that they didn't do it because the final shot of the dead people
it's creepy.
is better.
It is creepy. They could have even did just a post-credit shot.
Yeah, post-credit would have been great. Yeah, I agree. All right, so total kills. We have 4. We have Arlette, who had her throat slit by Henry and Wilf. Shannon, who was shot in the stomach and bled to death. Henry, who shot himself in the head. And Wilf, who was either killed by ghosts or eaten by rats or eaten by himself or killed him. Something happened to him, but he's dead.
5 if you count the baby. But
Yeah, didn't
it's
count
essentially
that. 6 if you count the cow.
all their bloodline. 7 if you count both cows.
Well, only one cow was like a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the whole bloodline though.
Yeah.
And his wife, his son, and the baby his son made with who he was going to make his wife. All of them wiped out.
So favorite kill, this is your pick, so you are up.
I went with Arlette because
Really?
the botched throat slice was super awesome looking. I would say a close second being that curb stomped rat. With the practical effects on that was good.
I actually went with Wilf because it's the
poetic.
It's everything. It's the them being there is so fucking creepy. Them pulling out the original knife is great. Him being like surrounded by rats is great. And it's really just the kind of cherry on top of this really shitty, creepy movie. Like it's just, I really like it. Even though I don't get to see Wilf die, it's still my favorite kill.
Yeah, I didn't consider it because we don't get to see it. Even if we would have got like an after shot of like his body bit the fuck up or eaten up or something. But when I was doing mine, I kind of just left it between the 3 that we do actually see, or at least see the aftermath of. But I thought Arlette, man, they did such a good job at making that such a like trauma-inducing event. Like they think it's gonna go over like really simple, and it doesn't.
It's very realistic.
Yeah, it's very, very realistic, and it's gruesome, and it sets the stage and what essentially happens to Henry and possibly Wilf. Some of the stuff may have been in his head due to the trauma and the regret of what he did. So, yeah, that was my pick.
All right, so film rating.
All right. I gave this a 4.5. I think this is a
nice,
really good movie. It's a poetic justice. That is, this movie has so much poetic justice. It really touches on body horror, which is something you don't hear mentioned with this movie very much. Like with the rats eating inside the body and stuff. Yeah. It's also a lot of psychological, a lot of great horror imagery. The symbolism with the rats, symbolizing her and her constantly reminding him that she is there and she has cursed him and always haunting him. Super just haunting, super creepy. The cinematography is great. I talked about that a little bit earlier with the natural lighting. Thought they nailed it. Amazing timepiece. I mean, you feel like for almost 2 hours you're in 1922. The pace was great. So this movie is a slow burn, but it's one of those slow burns where if you're somebody who likes a good slow burn, this is a good slow burn. Like
it's a good steady story. Yeah. It's got good pacing. It's just slow pacing.
Yeah, there's never any part of the movie where you're like, damn, this is kind of boring. Like there's constantly good stuff, constantly important stuff happening, especially once you get halfway through it. From that point on, it's like, holy shit, how is this going to get any worse for this guy?
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting worse. Thought the score was masterful. That's one thing, cranking up the surround sound. I noticed the score was really good. I don't know who did the score for it, but they did a really good job. Limited practical effects, but the ones we did get were amazing. The makeup on the dead family members were legitimately scary. I thought overall just a perfectly dark story of poetic justice on how a man's selfish decision literally destroys everything.
Yeah. I gave it pretty similar to you. I gave it a 4.3. I love the story. It is very Edgar Allan Poe, the Telltale Heart. It is very ironic in the end, and I always love that. Cinematography is great. The effects and makeup are great. The acting, in my opinion, is phenomenal. And the music really steps up the story. In my opinion, it is like what music did for The Shining. When you go back and you watch The Shining, those creepy scenes with that certain music and timed perfect, they amp up the creepiness, and that this movie does that too. There's a lot of awesome creepy music in this. It definitely enhanced the scenes. It made them feel so much more dreadful and creepy. And Thomas Jane knocks this out of the park, I think.
Yeah, I don't know how I didn't mention the acting. That's literally one of the two biggest things in this movie. He's absolutely phenomenal.
Everybody in this is pretty good. But yeah, 4.3 for me.
It's a good movie, man.
Yeah, if you have not seen this movie, go watch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you like ghost movies, ghost stuff. I'm not a huge ghost movie fan, but this is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I really wish this movie got more credit. Not even necessarily credit because it gets rated good. I just wish it was out there more. Like more people knew about it, more people talked about it. Like if you were a listener on YouTube, please like and comment on this video because this isn't a huge movie, so it's not going to get pushed out to the algorithm with a lot of keywords and stuff. But I think this is one that deserves to get pushed out as much as possible. So like and comment and get this shit out there so people can learn about it.
Yeah, and this is a Stephen King story,
Yeah.
So if you're a Stephen King fan, definitely watch it. I mean, this is it's actually fairly accurate to the novella. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, and Stephen King is, like you mentioned earlier, he doesn't always have the greatest things to say
No, he's
about
very critical.
his adaptations, and he had said nothing but good things about this. I mean, he said it was a super creepy.
So once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your pet rat about the show. We hope to see you next time. You got any last words?
No.
No. In the end, we all get caught.